That's kind of a, I'm giving you a little break, but some of it is there's just been so many things floating around in my mind this week that, you know, and I found something that I was working on last night and going, well, that's too short for a Sunday morning sermon. So I said, well, maybe I'll just do it Sunday night. And we live in a strange world. We live in a world of approximations, exaggerations, and lies. You know, I mean, that's just the thing, is words are used willy-nilly and just, it can be very confusing. I mean, if you think words mean something, there was a court case recently that said a foot-long sandwich does not have to be 12 inches long. Now, yeah, that's just one of those things about life. You know, that sometimes words don't mean what we think they mean, and concepts don't mean what we think they mean, and so people get confused, and that's just one of the problems we have. Now, you know, there was a story of a movie theater that advertised popular prices. When a customer went there and complained, they said, well, they're popular with us. You know, things just aren't always the same, and so we have to learn to do something that is very boring, okay? It's called defining terms. I don't know if any of you have ever been in debate, but if a debate is done right, the first thing you do is you define terms. That's why if you read some of the religious debates and you read the title of them and they're very strange. They're not naturally flowing speaking. They're just kind of a weird way of saying, because they want to be very particular. And we need to do that when it comes to studying the Bible. We need to be very particular. You can get off sometimes by taking things and going, well, this word is similar, and this concept is similar, and you can come up with something totally off the wall. Dub and I were talking about a person who does that just this morning. The problem was not in the Bible study, it was in the using of the words and losing the whole meaning. And so I'm going to talk about something that you hear all the time, and I think it's important that we Christians understand the truth. The title of this is, You Can't Legislate Morality. Or can you? I want you to think about that, because you're going to hear that a lot. That's a very common phrase, isn't it? If you don't believe that, well, you're just crazy, right? That's what you hear all the time. Well, hate to tell you, but in one sense, that is absolutely true. You can't legislate morality. And there's a reason for that. Because morality does not come from what is outside. Morality comes from the inside. You cannot regulate what someone thinks, feels, or believes. You just can't do it. No matter what you do, you cannot legislate the correct attitude. Turn to Matthew 23, verses 25 and 26. The book of Matthew. And that's chapter chapter 13. Bad on me, chapter 13, and verse, no, it's 23, 25, and 26. I'm getting confused. I'm trying to let you get where you're going, and then my mind runs so fast it ran all over me. See if I can get there again. Matthew 23. And we'll start with verse 25. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you clean the outside of the cup and the plate, but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgence. You blind Pharisee, first clean the inside of the cup and the plate, that the outside may also be clean. You mean the inside of a person can be totally different than the outside? That if you tell somebody you can't do something wrong, that their heart can still be bad? They can still be wrong in their heart? Absolutely. You can't legislate morality. Keep going in that chapter into the next verse. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you are like whitewashed tombs, which outwardly appear beautiful, but within are full of dead people's bones and all uncleanness. So you also outwardly appear righteous to others, but within you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness. These were people who were following the law strictly, the law of morality, but inside they were full of hypocrisy. And they were full of dead men's bones. That doesn't mean anything to us. That just means, yeah, it's something old and rotten. But to a Jew, if you touched someone dead, you were unclean. That was total filth. It wasn't just something old and decaying. You could not touch that. And Jesus understood this. He actually covered the idea that inward morality, which is goodness, ethical behavior, and right, that's what moral is, that did not necessarily equate to doing the right thing. Turn to the Gospel of John, and we're going to go to the 4th chapter and verse 23. But the hour is coming, and is now here, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For the Father is seeking such people to worship him. Attitude and action. Truth is an action. Because they've been talking about where should we worship God? Should we worship God here where my Samaritan fathers worship him in the trees? Or should we go to Jerusalem like you Jews do? And he said, Jews know it. They're right, but the fact is, that's not enough. God wants worshipers who worship him with the right attitude and the right action. So Jesus is explaining that there are two things involved in morality that should be together. That is moral inside and moral behavior outside. You cannot legislate a person to be good. You cannot make a law that will make a person be moral. It just will not ever happen. However, you can legislate moral behavior. You can legislate behavior. And if you don't believe that, go back to the 10 Commandments in Exodus 20, starting with verse 1. Those are all moral things. The correct and moral way to view God. The correct and moral way to view your neighbor. And he legislated This is what you do. Now, did that mean that they were all necessarily moral, even if they did it? No. But was it a good thing to legislate the morality? I think it is. Because sometimes we don't think about some things. We just take things the way that are told. Well, you can't legislate morality. What do you think the prohibition on murder is? That is a legislation for moral behavior. Why else do you say not to do it? Because it's not right, it's not ethical, it's not good. That means it's not moral. Well, what about theft? What about, if you look at our entire, and I mean entire criminal code, all it is legislating moral behavior. Even when you get down to silly laws, like sound laws. In the city, you can only make noise above a certain level up to a time at night. Why? Because it is not moral to keep your neighbors up all night. Our criminal justice system is built strictly on legislating morality. So, it's true, you can't legislate morality, but you can legislate moral behavior. And that's the best you can do. But isn't that a good thing? If we use the same reasoning that people use to say, well, you can't do that, you can't legislate morality. No, we're legislating moral behavior. We can't change a person's heart. But if we use that same argument, we would lose the prohibition on murder, on theft, on rape, on everything in our entire criminal code. Because all they are is ways to enforce moral behavior for the good of the public and for the good of the criminal. Most people don't understand that God's laws are not mean. Every one of his laws is good for the people that keep it. Even if we don't like it, they are all good. But one thing I want you to go, well, but you kept doing a law for everybody. You just can't do that. Turn to 1 Timothy, the first chapter, and verse 9. This is one of my favorite verses because it actually throws upside down the way an awful lot of us think. Understanding this, that the law is not laid down for the just, but for the lawless and disobedient, for the ungodly and sinners, for the unholy and profane, and for those who strike their fathers and mothers, for murderers. And we can go on and read everything there, and you should, but I don't want to get on a soapbox, so I'm just going to stop right there and get us an understanding that the law was not written for good people. It was never written for the just. The law was written to adjust the behavior of the unjust. That's what it was for. When you become like Jesus, when he is living in you, you don't have to look for the law. When you're like him, you do it naturally. There's not a law that says, oh, this person is having a problem on the side of the road. I need to stop and I need to help them. The two great commandments that Jesus said the whole law was built on, love God and love your neighbor, that's all that laws ever are. All they are is how do you respect God And how do you respect your neighbor? How do you love your neighbor? That's what it's all about. And you don't need a detailed law. The better you are, the more that Jesus lives in you, the less you're worried about what it says. You're liable to go beyond that because you're going back to the original, the great. You know when Jesus said that the entire law and prophets hang on this, or built on it? He's saying that those are before the Ten Commandments. Because everything in the Ten Commandments is contained in those two. The first three are how do you love God? The rest are how do you love your neighbor? That's why he went way back, even further than the Ten Commandments, to everything. No, we can't make people moral. You can't legislate morality, but you can legislate moral behavior for the good of everyone. But don't believe the lie that, well, you can't do that. If you can't make laws about morality, we have no criminal justice system. And we need to understand that for thousands of years, this book has been the standard of morality. Now, I don't care what religion you go to, what system of belief you go to. The gold standard for moral living has always been this book. And will always be this book. You don't believe that? Muhammad had a whole lot of slaves and believed in marrying off under-teen girls. So, we need a moral standard. You can't live without one. This one has stood the test of time for thousands of years, and it's up to us to make sure that we don't give up on it and we don't fall for the lies. If anyone needs to answer the invitation, we'd ask that you come now as we stand and as we sing.